Before I was a rabbi, I was talking with my rabbi about loving God. I note that even rabbis have rabbis. I actually have two. And I bring this up because this week's Torah portion, V'etchanan, contains the Shema. We read the words, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with everything else." I guess I should say the V'ahavta and Shema are actually the same prayer. The V'ahavta is the Shema too. They don't teach us that in religious school. I didn't find that out till later. And essentially, this whole command to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with everything else, well, it's easier said than done. How are we supposed to love God? That was the question I asked my rabbi, and his response was not a simple answer, but a unique perspective that I've found enlightening and useful. He cautioned me not to equate love for God with the love of another human being. The distinction is crucial. Loving God is a wholly different experience, one that transcends any understanding that we can have of love in our human relationships. I've had a different rabbi go as far to say that the commandment to love God is impossible. How can you command an emotion, she said. Is it impossible? I don't think so. But I thought what I would do tonight is take a look at what some classical commentators said about this question through the ages. My goal is twofold. First, I hope it'll clarify and focus something that we do all the time, saying the Shema and V'ahavta. What exactly does it mean that we say that we love God? And second, I want to address the larger spiritual question at hand. What does loving God, what role does that play in our spiritual lives? So we'll begin with the words of the Torah. When we hear the opening words of the V'ahavta, we immediately think it's about love. When scholars say, nope, it's not. It isn't talking about loving God, it's talking about being loyal to God. The book of Deuteronomy is very concerned with covenantal loyalty. There's this agreement between God and the people of Israel. And like any relationship, human relationship, this goes both ways. In this case, one side of the deal is that, well, at least according to Deuteronomy, we obey the commandments. And the other side of the deal is that God, in turn, I had one rabbi call it this, shares God's infinite beneficence with us. In other words, we get a lot of good things. And that's not a bad deal at all. Let's not go into the whole quid pro quo aspect of this, and we probably want more out of our relationship of the divine as far as quid pro quo. But for now, let's just take that at face value and see what we can learn from it. And what it teaches us broadly is that part of love is responsibility. Part of loving God entails responsibility. There is a baseline of behavior that we need to meet, no matter how we define that as Reformed Jews. There's still a baseline of behavior. We need to maintain this baseline that we create for ourselves in partnership with God, even when life is complicated. As a Buddhist said to me, the karma is the dharma. I'll translate that. In other words, it's what you have now that you got to work with. This is the thing right here now that we have to work with. Another thing we learn from this is that love of God requires action. We have to actually do something. So Judaism has always been a religion of action over belief, and connection without action is meaningless by the Jewish tradition. You have to do something. So we move forward to the Talmud. The section of the Talmud I want to talk about is something that's really relevant in the coming months. It's from the tractate Yoma, which is the tractate of the Talmud that talks about Yom Kippur. There's a section, pages 85 through 86, which is really the only place in the Talmud that talks about repentance. Thankfully, that 4 pages are really good. So later people have a lot to work with. And ultimately in this section, a real emphasis is is that our actions can make God beloved to us. And this may sound unusual, this next part, but the rabbis talk about Torah study as the means to this. So why Torah study? Because to the classical rabbis, Torah study is the ultimate mitzvah, the ultimate commandment. Everything comes from it. So, not surprised. At the same time, this is performing the commandments no matter how we define that as Reformed Jews, obviously. Or even whether we use the word commandment. That was a huge debate back in the 90s. Should we use the word commandment? Proper action is not just a matter of performing the ritual commandments like we just did when we lit Shabbat candles. It's also a matter of performing moral commandments. Proper moral action is absolutely essential, a key and an emphasis of Reform Judaism, but also to the classical rabbis. Caring for people in need, offering comfort to the bereaved, acts of loving kindness, to do a bit of the list that's at the end of Mishnah Sukkah. What inspires us to ethical action, according to the rabbis, is study of Torah. So by studying Torah and acting morally, God becomes beloved to us. There's a path to this love, and the path to this love is action, how we define it. That ultimately expands this relationship from the mind to the heart. So it's this idea that through the mind, through study, we end up opening up the heart. So what does this teach us? In a way, the Talmud's message is similar to the Torah's message. We have a basic responsibility to act correctly. We have a basic responsibility to act morally. We show our love for God through these actions. And at the same time, we find our love for God through these actions. The love of God is not a passive process. Like any relationship, here I'm contradicting myself, it demands action. Let's turn to Moses Maimonides, who I've talked about before. I mean, just an amazing scholar. And he's also concerned with how we go about loving God, but he has a different answer than the Torah and the classical rabbis. Maimonides is a philosopher. So you think the rabbis are intellectuals, Maimonides. So it's utterly unsurprising that for Maimonides, achieving a love of God is a matter of contemplation. We'd probably use the word meditation these days. A simple contemplation. And for Maimonides, he's as much of a disciple of Aristotle as he is of earlier rabbinic tradition, but I digress. So what are we supposed to contemplate according to him? We're supposed to contemplate the absolutely remarkable wonders of creation. I woke up this morning. There are trees out there giving us oxygen. Look at the veins in a leaf. Look at the roots that go into the ground. That it's absolutely remarkable. Look at the complexity of the human body and that ours are still vaguely working. Right? Time passes, vaguely. Beyond comprehension, the carbon was put together in such a way that we sit here. Right? Got a little excited. When we contemplate this, we'll see how minuscule we are. And through that, paradoxically, I mean, really, what are we from the perspective of all time and space, really? So, you think you're a macher, you're a pisher, right? That's what Maimonides wants us to get to. That how can we not love God when we experience the wonder of life? So what do we have to learn from him? Life's incredible. Let's not forget it, even when we're hurting. Life's incredible. Walk out of the temple and observe the beauty of nature. Recognize the love that you feel for the person who sits next to you. And when we contemplate these things, how could we not love God? So Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition, takes the foundation laid by Maimonides and expands upon it. When we think of Hasidic Jews, we tend to think of highly close communities, and they are. What we may not realize is that in its founding moment, Hasidism was the great equalizer. Its founder, the Baal Shem Tov, believed that every human being can do this contemplation of the divine that I was just talking about, where Maimonides would have said it's an intellectual lead over in the corner that's doing it. He said, everybody can do this. And in doing so, the Baal Shem Tov really changed my ideas about contemplation of the divine. Essentially, this means every person has the potential to understand and connect with the divine, regardless of their intellectual or spiritual background. We all have it. It's something that we can open. If we simply contemplate the wonder of creation, each and every one of us in the smallness that we have within it, same general concept, but we can all do it. That's what opens us up to the love of God in our hearts. So what does this teach us? There aren't any excuses. We can all do it. It's within us. We can do it. Sometimes it's hard. I'm not denying that. Not every moment. If we get it once a day, that's really good. But we all have the capacity to encounter something bigger than ourselves, no matter what we call it. God, in whatever language you want to use. We have the capacity to experience that. That's what the Kabbalists move it over towards. From Maimonides' thought into experience. We can experience it. God is in us. God's waiting to be revealed by our thoughts, our emotions, our actions. As the book of Deuteronomy says later on, now what am I commanding you today? It's not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. It's not up in the heavens, so you have to ask who will ascend into the heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it. Nor is it beyond the sea, so that you have to ask who will cross the sea to get it and proclaim it to us so that we may obey it. No. The word, and that's Torah. The Torah is very near to you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart. So do it. That's simple. Torah is near to you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart. So do it. And when we become aware of this reality, how could we not express love to the divine? How could we not be aware of it? So after hearing all these rabbinic opinions, you thought I was going to be giving a whole intellectual thing there in any case. After hearing all these rabbinic opinions, I hope we can confidently say that the commandment to love God's not impossible. Doesn't mean it's not difficult, but it's not impossible. And I believe we can also confidently say that it's not easy, as I just said. Nonetheless, it can be something that moves our spiritual life into a new place. Striving to love God. Striving is the key thing. Don't worry so much about the destination. Striving, the process. Striving to love God can remind us that our actions are a necessary part of our spiritual life. It can remind us that God can make us more aware of the wonder of living in this beautiful world, and vice versa. The wonder of this beautiful world can make us more aware of God. And that striving to love God can cultivate a sense of humility before that same wonder. And that's a preview of coming attractions, because next week's about humility. So what will you think about the next time you say, V'ahavta Adonai Elohecha, you shall love Adonai your God? Shabbat Shalom.